Well, welcome back to the last session of the Central Arizona Vita Network's 2024 tax law training. In the last session, in session 5, we went over itemized deductions and the Affordable Care Act and miscellaneous forms, other taxes that you might have to pay. Basically, by the end of session 5, you've gotten all the information you need to be able to take the certification test. But this last session is going to help get you somewhat familiar with what it'll be like working at a Vita site. In this session, we're going to talk about some customer service tips. How do you deal with clients when you're sitting down with them? We'll briefly go back over the quality site requirements because you are responsible for following those, and IRS does check up on us once in a while. Um, we'll also describe there's most Vita sites, a lot of them anyway, offer what they call facilitated self-assistance, or we affectionately call do-it-yourself taxes, where we set somebody over at a computer, we give them a link, and they can access the software and do their own return. And we're just there, we can maybe help them a little bit. So I'll show you how that process works. Um, then we'll talk about the volunteer agreement form that you have to give to your site coordinators and your volunteer coordinator at the partner that you work with. And last, we'll just recap some of the resources that you have available to you to help you do this. So let's share my screen and we'll go over this. So this is last session 6. And as I said, I've already kind of described what we're going to do here. So let's talk about customer service. And it's sort of like in a retail environment, not really, but a little bit like that. You want to be pleasant, you want to smile, you always want to be civil and respectful towards people. Um, Sometimes they've been waiting a long time and they're kind of aggravated or what, but if you're just pleasant with them, it goes away, and you want to explain the process, and what I mean by that is, tell them, make them aware you're going to complete the return, you're going to put in all of their information, but then they're going to have to wait a couple more minutes to have a quality review done, and then we'll give them a copy of the return and we're going to e-file their return. Um, Trust me, nobody knows everything. And you're going to run into situations where you just don't know the answer. Don't be afraid to acknowledge that. Get your site coordinator or one of the other volunteers to help you. And in fact, that's part of what we have fun doing is solving the puzzles. Nobody knows everything about this. And our whole goal is to do an accurate return. That's really all we're trying to do. Get them the most money they can and keep them out of trouble. Okay. You want to listen to them. Listen carefully, use appropriate questions, try to get all the information you need to do that accurate return. Empathize and understand that. Some of these folks, especially, we're dealing with low income folks, and some of them are really struggling. And so, try to be understanding that life maybe hasn't dealt them the same set of cards that were dealt to you. Look for ways to get to yes. I mean, sometimes these folks, they've been told other things. We have to re-educate them. We have to show them stuff and try to get them to understand so that we don't have to turn them away to go to a paid preparer that's probably going to tell them the same thing, except charge them a couple $100, right? Okay. You will make mistakes. Okay. Just own up to them with humility, apologize, take ownership of the problem, say, hey, you're going to get somebody with a little more experience to help, and we're going to get an accurate return done for you. Create relationships, to strive to, empathize, understand their problems. And you'll find some of these clients come back and they only want to work with you, you know. We always try to provide reasonable accommodations. We get folks that have other disabilities or other challenges that they can't do. We try to give them the correct accommodation that we can. most of our sites, a lot of our sites are in public places like community colleges or libraries or service centers or what, and they're already very accustomed to making sure that they've got ramps and they've got doors that and bathrooms and things that can accommodate people who need special services too. Sometimes we're going to get people who are hearing impaired or visual impaired, and we've got some resources to help them. The idea is get your site coordinator involved where you need some help with some of this stuff. Other reasonable accommodations, allowing service animals into that. Now, maybe you've got an allergy to a dog or whatever. Talk to your site coordinator. We'll find somebody else to help them. It's really okay. I think I've talked about most of these other things too. Okay. So sometimes, you know, the client, they've done their return the prior year, man, they got a whopping refund. They come back this year and, it's way less. And they just figure you've made a mistake. They're angry. Don't argue with them. Okay. Oftentimes, what I can do, and it's a good practice for you as well, is hopefully they brought their last year's return. You can pull up, create a PDF of their return. And this helps for your review. Maybe you've missed something, right? But you can go down through it and we can educate the customer. Yeah, you got these credits last year, but then this year you didn't owe as much tax, so you didn't get all of the credit, right? And usually they can understand. But the more important thing is if anything starts to get away from you, right? Get the site coordinator involved. Don't escalate it. Don't, just if you can handle it, great. If you can if they're getting loud and you feel that you've built a relationship with them, you can kind of walk them outside and help them, great. But if not, get the site coordinator involved as soon as possible. And especially if they ever threaten you, just stop right there. Don't even say another word. Just, get up and go get the site coordinator. With the client documents, many sites, and in fact, some of our sites in the Phoenix area are community colleges. There's an agreement with the community colleges. We absolutely will not keep any document of the clients. They have to go back to them. Other sites and other partners, and depending on the site coordinator, they may want to keep at least a copy of the signed 8879, that's the authorization to e-file. And that way the site coordinator knows for sure that they can transmit the return. And as soon as they do that and the return's accepted, they're responsible for shredding the documents. So maybe we might keep something temporarily, but in general, we want everything to go back to the client. We've got a nice envelope. We put everything in there. We tell them to bring that envelope back next year. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we definitely want to safeguard the confidentiality of taxpayer information. It's extremely important. And sometimes that extends beyond just the pieces of paper, but making sure you've got enough distance. Or I was just listening to somebody today say that they work at a site in kind of a large computer room that has a glass wall. And, he was saying they never do returns at the computers that are facing that glass wall so that somebody can't walk by and take a picture of a screen with the bank account information or social security number. So just being aware of your environment and you're protecting their data. These are the quality site requirements. Now, you've already taken a test on the volunteer standards of conduct, and if you've gone over those things, you should at least be aware of these. But we want to recap these for you because, and here's where we want to emphasize, is that you have as much responsibility as us as making sure we adhere to these QSRs. We get random reviews from IRS, and this is kind of their check sheet that they're going to go by, is are we following these 10 quality site requirements? The first one is that you're certified to do the return that you're working on. In other words, if you're working on a return that requires advanced certification, you have that certification instead of basic certification, things like that. We will also, don't be surprised with this too. It says here, we will need to confirm your identity when you report to the site for the first time. We'll need to see that your driver's license or other photo ID, and it needs to match what's on your volunteer agreement. That's why we told you when you registered for Lincoln Learn to use your first, use the name that's on your photo ID because it's got to match up. The second one is that we use this intake and interview process and the quality review sheet that every return. When they come into a site to look at us and see how we're doing, they're going to want to look at a couple of returns and see that we use that intake and interview sheet. Okay. And it's your tool to make sure you're doing an accurate return and you've asked all the appropriate questions of the taxpayer. Every return has to be quality reviewed by at least someone of the same certification level or higher. All sections have to be completed on the intake form. We can't leave stuff blank, because we need to kind of ensure that we've engaged the taxpayer and discussed everything with them. There have to be reference materials on site. We used to have, of course, you've got your own 4012 that's in a hard copy. This over here is the publication 17. As long as they're available electronically, a lot of sites on their computers, they have links to, they maybe have them downloaded on the desktop, and if nothing else, like at the City of Phoenix, there's always a volunteer resources site on the City of Phoenix Vita site that we can get to these publications. And IRS is going to want to ensure that, you can get to them electronically, quick enough to be able to reference them. There has to be a volunteer agreement. You must sign it either manually or electronically. At the end of this, we're going to show you how you can do this through Lincoln Learn. The copy has to be given to your volunteer coordinator, and we recommend you print a hard copy and take to your site coordinator. Most site coordinators like to keep a copy of this, so they've got contact information for you and stuff like that. QSR number 6, this really applies to the site coordinator or electronic return originator. Those are usually the same person, but the person who files the return. It has to be timely, and they've got to deal with rejects in a very short amount of time. The one that really applies to you, and really only if you're reviewing returns, quality reviewing returns, is that the taxpayer and the spouse must sign that Form 8879 IRS e-file authorization before we can transmit their return. And so if you're the quality reviewer, you're the one who's going to be giving them a copy and having them sign that form. The rest of this stuff basically applies to the site coordinator. Here's a poster that we're all required to display at the tax site, and here the site coordinator really is responsible for doing this, but it's letting everybody know what their civil rights are. Number 8, the site ID number has to be correct, and again, you have no control over that. That's up to the volunteer coordinator and the site coordinator to make sure we've got the software set up properly. Same thing with the e-file number. It's got to be the correct one, but again, that's really up to the site coordinator and the Vita coordinator too. The last one is that we really follow security, privacy, and confidentiality. And I already spoke of this, but a copy of this publication that we've got here, Privacy, Confidentiality, and Civil Rights, has to be available at the site. So that we can refer to those issues if something comes up. This is IRS publication 4299. Okay, let's talk about facilitated self-assistance, or probably a better descriptive term is do-it-yourself taxes. There are lots of instances where folks come, and more folks are getting computer savvy and can file their own returns. And we are able to give them a link so that they can use our software completely free of charge. Sometimes there's a lot of variety of softwares out there, but and many of them will say, hey, we'll do it for free, but that has to be the barest simple return. They start charging for extra forms or state returns or other things. They can do their whole return absolutely for free. with us. Sometimes there's cases where we can't help them do their return, such as married filing separate. Now, we can still give them the link. They can do their own return that way. We have to be very careful. You'll see in another slide. We can only help them with things that are within the scope. In other words, I just gave the example, if we were turning somebody away because they're married filing separate. They may have a very simple return. Their spouse hasn't been there for 3 or 4 years. Their spouse is filing completely on their own. And so they may elect to go file their own return. We cannot help them with issues such as Arizona community property or anything like that because it's out of scope. But this is a way that they can do it. Or maybe they've got a rental property and they're very organized and they know what their income and expenses are. They've got full use of the software and they can do it. But we just cannot help them with that. Now, the other part of this, and I'll go through these slides because I'm getting kind of ahead of myself, but just as this slide is saying, more and more people are getting used to doing stuff themselves. I mean, people used to never pump their own gasoline. They'd always go to the bank teller up and walk to the teller, but now we're using ATMs. You get the idea. So what adding this self-service option allows us to do is, instead of just one volunteer only being able to help one person, we can get one volunteer that can help many taxpayers at once. It increases efficiency. It also teaches people about their own taxes. And part of our mission is to educate folks on tax law, what to do. There's the limit last year. We haven't really gotten information if they're going to increase this or not. But so here's another thing. Sometimes we turn somebody away because they're over the $67,000 limit, but maybe they're not that far over it. They can go do their own return, but now there is a $79,000 limit for facility, say, FSA returns. Okay. As I said, we can encourage volunteers to do their own return. Now, but if they do this and they come back next year, we're going to have to give them a link. See, we give them a link every year. That link is can only be used once by the same person. It changes every year, so they'll have to come back and we'll have to give them a new link. Sometimes this says, so sometimes what happens is we just send them a link, they do their return at home, and we never hear from them again. Other times, but we say, hey, you can come into a site, and we've got specific sites where we have volunteers who will help you. Or in the case of my sites, I help people remotely. I'll establish Zoom calls with them and walk them through how to do their return. So there's a variety of ways that we can help people. Once you set up this FSA account, you've been given the link, you click on it, you set up the account, and we're going to show you those screens. The software is identical to what we use at a Vita site. It's just exactly the same thing. So tips for if you're going to be one of those volunteers who help, right, is make sure that they've got the correct website address. Okay. Usually we have a handout for them to work from that gives them some basic instructions. Again, I have a series of videos for those folks who go home and want to do it. I've got a series of videos that walk them right through how to do their own return with facilitated self-assistance. Oftentimes, if you're helping them at a site and the client gets to a page that shows that they're charging a fee, they've done something wrong. They need to start all over again, start from the link and do that. Because there is no charge for what we do. Period. I said this, but it's worth repeating again. If a client's filing a return that would normally be out of scope, we need to tell the client that we're not trained to provide assistance in that area. If they're going to be doing a rental property and they start asking us about depreciation of that, we have to say, look, we're just not trained in depreciation or rental properties, and if they can't figure it out, we may suggest maybe you need to go to a paid preparer. Okay. Um, Often when we're helping them and towards the end of that, we'll ask them, are you sure that there's any other forms that you haven't been able to enter or you weren't sure what to do this? And prior to printing the return, we want to make sure we help them do an accurate return. We remind them that they're going to have to get a new link next year when they come back. Okay, so usually there'll be some form that we give them because when they first start up um, they have to create an account in TaxSlayer, and they really need to be sure they know the username and password, just like us with all of our usernames and passwords. So we give them, something to which they can record it and tell them to safeguard it, to do it. So when we give them this link, they're going to get right in here. This will be the first screen. They're going to create an account right here. And by the way, these screenshots are from last year. We really haven't seen the new FSA, but as we've seen with TaxSlayer and in the practice lab, there really isn't much different from last year. So I suspect everything that I'm about to show you will be pretty close to identical to the 24 tax season. So they'll put in their email address, put a username, password. Um, a mobile phone is really recommended because they're going to have to do that two-factor authentication. They'll be doing it. And if they don't do this, then they're going to have to be able to get to their email address to do the two-factor authentication. They'll be asked to, do something to confirm that they're a person, just like we're all getting used to. Here in this case, they sent a code to the mobile phone that the person put in. They put in the 6-digit code and they move on. Okay, so now they've created a TaxSlayer account. So they can just hit continue and keep going. It gives you some idea of what to expect. And some of the benefits of using the program. Okay. Then you start putting in information. And first, this one is kind of a consent thing that's saying, hey, we're storing your information. You got to give us permission to do that. IRS requires this. Okay. If you were filing with your spouse, you'd probably want to put, not probably, you have to check this box. Okay. Then it comes up to this screen. See, this is the screen I was telling you about. If they come up here and this isn't available, right? Their only choice is to pay for it. They've done something wrong and we need to start them all over again. It's real easy. And I don't know how it happens, but it seems to be real easy to miss some step and you end up at this screen to where they're going to want to charge you a fee. And if they're using our link, it should be completely free. State any form that's available in the TaxSlayer program, completely free. Okay. They'll get to the next step that says, hey, you can upload some of your forms and then we'll input some of the information for it. I would highly recommend you just skip this. Especially if there's a site, there's not scanners available. They might want to do this at home. It seems the experience I've had with doing these things in professional software is you spend more time double checking the information than it would be if you just input the information, because they do make mistakes sometimes when you've uploaded a form and it's transferring that information into the screens. So then here it's going to ask for the name, social security number, date of birth, occupation, just like in our TaxSlayer screen. Same thing about mailing addresses. They will ask what state you are and what your residency status is for the state. Again, here they're asking for a phone number. It says this is an IRS requirement for e-filing. You can enter it now and save later. Okay. Here you can select that you want to get text notifications and that you agree to the terms and conditions. It's telling you right here that text messaging is the most secure way of ensuring access to your return. Also, text messaging is the most reliable method for us to contact you. Now, I haven't read all these terms and conditions, but I suspect then sometime later on, you may get some kind of advertising. I'm not sure, but you can always opt out of it later if you want to. Until the return's filed and accepted, I would encourage them to put in these numbers. These are all those questions just that we've gone over when we start a return. Can you be claimed as a dependent? Are you over 18, a full-time student? Same set of questions that they need to ask. Here it asks for their filing status. Now, some of them may get confused about this. I've never shown you this filing status wizard, but you could click on this button. Could click on this button and answer questions. If we're there to help them, we can help them figure out their filing status. Pretty easy. Here it's, do they have any dependents? Just like our software, after we put in the basic information, it asks us if we have dependents here. It asks us if you have an identity protection pin, an IP pin. Now, right here, it says, well, which forms do you need? And you can search for them with QuickFile, like if they know exactly what forms they need, which is, we don't recommend that. It's not likely. It's better to say no, and then it's going to walk them through, an interview to make sure that they're catching everything, that somebody doesn't forget about something. So it'll take you right here to the screen. Do you want to select your forms or do you want to be guided? And we really want them to be guided through this, okay? So the next thing will be, first of all, do you have any wage and salary? You say yes or no. It'll then ask you, to input the information from here. You can scroll down and it's just like in our software, you put in the W-2 information, same thing here. When you click on continue, you could add another one here or just say continue and be done. You could edit it. Usually in most of these screens, there'll be 3 little vertical ellipses. When you click on that, you could go edit it. Like if you look at this and see you transposed a number, 28,140 instead of 21,840, you can go back and change it before you try and file it and make a bad mistake. Then it's going to ask you the same things that we do, like did you have a state and local refund? Do you have any interest in dividend income? Again, now after you've put in all the income, it'll walk you through all the income items. I didn't go through that. Did you have any capital gains? Did you have any other income? When you're done with the income, then you get to the deductions part. And again, you could say select forms. You could say I want to be guided. Maybe everybody knows there's absolutely no way they're itemizing deductions. They're going to take a standard deduction, and you could just say here, skip the deductions and go on. Then it'll take you to other screens that we went over like last time about other taxes that might be, or how to make payments and estimates, just like this. Miscellaneous forms. Maybe by then they figured out they owe some money and want to do an installment agreement. Then just like in our software, after you've done income and deductions and other forms, it's going to say, did you have insurance through the healthcare.gov or the marketplace? Assuming you select no here, if you select yes, it's going to be just like we taught you in the last session. They're going to have to go through and put in the 1095A. Assuming they select no and then hit continue, they're going to say, hey, your federal return's complete, but you probably want to add a state return. And then they would click on add a state return. It gives them a map here. They can click on Arizona, or they can click on another state. Or, this may be one of those cases where, they have a California W-2, and we've told them, look, we can't help you do that, but it's just a W-2. They know that there's nothing fancy. They can go do their own return, and this might be. Otherwise, we're going to say select Arizona, then continue. It'll ask you about your residency, and then you'll continue. And then it'll say, hey, we've transferred most of the information you need over here. You can say continue. It'll ask you some questions about, is this your first time filing? Did you use a different last name on the return? Then here it gives you, it says, here you've completed your standard Arizona state return, meaning the stuff that carried over from the federal. But hey, there may be some special situations. Did you pay school fees for a dependent to a public or private school? Remember, that could get them an Arizona tax credit. Hey, did you live and work on Native American land? Remember all the rules that we had here? It would help them. All of these things here that would help them maybe change their return. They can go click on these things and modify their return. If they get done with it and say, oh, whoops, I forgot something, they can always go back and edit the Arizona return. When you're done with all of that, you get to this screen, and we really want them to view or print their return and review it, because this is about the last chance before you electronically file the return. Now, they'll always be able to, if there's a printer on site, I encourage them to print the return and take it with them. But if not, or they're just at home and they're doing it, they can open this up. They'll have a PDF. They can always go back into their TaxSlayer account and access the return. Okay. But so anyway, after they print the return, we'll have them continue to go to the e-file screen. Oh, here was it. It'll take them to this, where this creates the PDF of the return. Okay. And here's where you could print the return, the PDF, that. So now it's getting ready to electronically file your return. And there's several steps before you actually e-file it. You have to verify your account. You got to select the return to file. You got to electronically sign your documents, and then you file them. So the next screens kind of take you that way. How do you verify your account? Remember, we told you the phone would be better. You could do it via email, but I think we're all getting used to getting, these kinds of confirmations on our phones. And so most people will be comfortable with that. Once you do that, sent you a code, you're going to put in the code, hit continue, ask you, are you really ready to file your return? So, and if you say yes here, then it comes up here. There are several of these screens. We've circled right here, no thanks. It's saying, do you want your refund on our TaxSlayer debit card? I'm not saying that this is a bad deal, but then it kind of, I don't know what to say about it, but we're going to get to the end of this, and I'm going to say the best way that you can get your refund is through direct deposit into your bank account. Okay. You could select this if you wanted to. Now it's going to ask you, how do you want to receive that? Direct deposit, we highly recommend this. Here's that Visa card I just showed you, and it would tell you, hey, we can start sending your paycheck up to this 2 days early with direct deposit. I mean, there's some advantages of that, but now you get kind of tied in, and we're not really recommending that. If you don't have a bank account, and if you don't want it on here, you can always have them mail the check. Next screen, and this is an IRS screen. Are you interested in investing your refund? The only investment is going to be for savings bonds. Okay. Then it says, how do you want to receive your Arizona refund? And here, it doesn't look like you could have this put onto that debit card. It's either mail a check, direct deposit. You could say skip now and file later, but again, we really want to encourage direct deposit. Okay. Now, it's going to try to sell you a few things that we really suggest they don't get. Audit assistance in case they get audited, $29. Just tell them no thanks. Okay. They could help you get a last will and testament, and I mean, if they really want this, that's up to them, but we really just want them to get through this return and not, have any money. They can always go back and buy this stuff later. Okay. So, and here it's asking for a donation to the TaxSlayer Foundation, right? We don't encourage that at all. So now it's going to give a review, and you should make sure that everything is free. You don't owe any money right now. Okay. Here's then where you're going to enter your bank account information. You're going to have to enter it twice, the routing number, the account number. And I always tell people, be very careful. If you put in something wrong, your refund's going to kind of be in refund purgatory for months. It'll take you a long time to get it. So be very careful about this. So here we've set it up. It's not going to display this amount, but if you realize, oh, hey, man, I put in my savings account, I want it to go to my checking account. You can, before you file it, you can always go back and edit it or delete it here. Maybe you decide, I just want to check. You come back. You've got one last chance to fix this, right? Now, there's a confirmation screen. And of course, these things are talking 2018. It's going to say, do you have access to your 2023 return? And if you do, then it's going to ask you for last year's adjusted gross income. If you don't, you can click this button and then they're going to give you a 5-digit PIN code, which you're going to have to remember to be able to access the return in the future. Okay? If you selected PIN, it's going to create the PIN for it. You're going to put in the PIN number there to get it. Now it gives you one last chance to kind of review some basic information, right? Then you hit continue. By the way, this is another consent that they have to agree to. Nothing is ever being transmitted to some other third party or whatever, but the reality is that TaxSlayer is holding this information so that when you go to do this next year, it'll remember all this information and put it in. And if they're holding it, they've got to disclose that they are. So you're almost done. It's going to want to make sure that you're not a robot, a bot doing this stuff. So you're going to have to enter in this code. Then you're going to say, wow, file my return. But now what if you change your mind? So the next few slides would help you with that, right? You can go ahead and here, you're going to log into TaxSlayer with that account information that hopefully you wrote down, okay? You get into here, you select my account, then you can go down here and you can go to transaction history. You can find this return and you can deactivate the return and start all over again. So you would select an option that, hey, I made mistakes, I want to start over, and it's going to delete. You go back in here, my account, and it's going to delete the return. Once you save and log out, and then you'll have to start all over again. Some folks, we just send them the link and they maybe have problems, and we tell them they can come back to a site. But then, and usually when we give them that link, we'll give them information about how they can check on their refunds, both federal and state. If they have other issues, they can email TaxSlayer from their website. We tell them how to go get help because they've done this return themselves through TaxSlayer. We don't have access to it. Okay, that was all about FSA. Now, here's just a recap of your reference tools and resources. The 4012, that's the volunteer resource guide, is the most handiest quick reference guide you're going to get to. This publication 4491 is what I described as the textbook. It's that 350-page, will give you more in-depth explanations of all the issues that are covered in here. There's a publication 17 that IRS puts out. It's not as thick as this, but it gives more abbreviated descriptions in, I like to say, IRS speak. You should have that on site. It's another quick reference guide. But there was this interactive tax assistant. I only showed it a little bit during those dependent screens we talked about, but that's where you could type in a question. It'll ask you questions like in the case where we said dependents, right? Did this child live with you for more than 6 months? Are you related to this child? Did the child have more income than those questions? And then it's going to tell you whether they qualify as a dependent or not. So you can always use that interactive tax assistant to do that. Then here's some more tools and resources. Your site coordinator and sometimes other volunteers. They're very good resources to use. Then there's a volunteer hotline. We don't usually recommend the volunteers use this. Really, we want the site coordinator. For one thing, when they call this number, they're going to be asked for the site ID number, and most volunteers don't know that. But sometimes we just get stuck on a return and we need to call them, and then they can access the return and tell us what box we forgot to check, or sometimes it's actually their fault for that. There is this website right here that's got everything on there. It's got all these publications. It's got links to these slides. It's got links to the videos. It's got a ton of resources, and it's available. You don't have to be a City of Phoenix volunteer. Anybody can go look at this here. So this is a good little site to bookmark on your browser. Okay, a few more things and then we'll be all done here. Sometimes you get talking to some of these taxpayers And while they're in a bad state, man, they haven't filed for years, they know they're going to owe a ton of money, or they filed and IRS is threatening to levy their bank accounts and they just can't pay, they need help. Maybe, they've been promised refunds and IRS has been sending them letters, and they're just really needing the money and just can't get through to IRS, right? Um, Usually this is when they need legal help, and it's called the Low Income Tax Clinic. Um, they represent low income taxpayers in controversies with the IRS. You've tried to resolve things with the IRS and, you just hit a brick wall. Sometimes they can. So there's locations all throughout Arizona, here in Maricopa County, it's there. They're funded with grants from the Internal Revenue Service. Their low income is defined as 250% of the federal poverty level, and that's specific for Arizona. So single people, their income has to be below 31.9. Family of four, 52.4, unless, they must be a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident. I forgot what an H-2A worker is, but unless they're a victim of domestic violence, and then they'll help them then too. Okay. Types of cases that they help is, they've been audited, assessed to debt, they've been denied dependents, or they got denied the earned income credit and they think that they're entitled to it. Maybe they're in arguments with their spouse and their spouse, is doing something, they can help them. They do not do tax preparation. They're going to refer you back to a Vita site. Sometimes my organization, City of Phoenix, the City of Phoenix, Masters of Coin, we've done these joint things with the Native American community where the Low Income Tax Clinic comes and helps these people, and then they kind of refer us across the room and we'll prepare their returns, and they go back to the attorney so that they can help them resolve problems with the IRS. They help with tax liens and levies, wage garnishment, payment plans, offers and compromise, and getting put into what they call non-collectible status. So this is kind of what I just kind of went over. Oh, sometimes they'll help with innocent spouse relief. I described that, I think, in the last session, where, IRS is snagging refunds, and really the one spouse had no idea about all these other debts, and they're paying back for something from prior to when they were ever married, right? And so they can get released that. They can help with exams and audits, identity theft. Okay, so these are common services. So types of cases that we can refer to the LITC is when they've got a number of returns for prior years, they owe balances and they can't pay. Maybe they had their social security number stolen. Maybe they need to sell their home, but IRS has put a tax lien on it. They can help get that lien removed so they can sell the home and maybe get even with IRS. Okay. As I said, maybe if they've got debts from a prior marriage that they don't know, or, at least this was probably in the last couple of years, this is kind of going away. There's only one more year you can file returns about getting the stimulus payment, but maybe it was denied. You filed a return, you claimed it, it was denied. They said, oh no, we sent this, and you never got it, and you butted heads with them. Maybe LITC can help them get that. So here's how you can contact them. You can either go to their website or call this number. Usually this information will be available at the sites, or it's easy to find online. It's not hard to find. This is actually the attorney that runs our Maricopa low-income taxpayer clinic. So that's her contact information. Now, that was when you need a lawyer, but sometimes before you need a lawyer, you've just been butting heads with them and you just can't get anywhere. You're really not at the point to where you need legal help, but you're really just frustrated to no end. So there's something called the Taxpayer Advocate Service. They're an independent organization, but they're within the IRS. You say, well, how can that be? How can they be independent? Because there is actually a taxpayer advocate a person Erin Collins is her name. She reports to Congress, separately. And so therefore, even though this service is a part of the IRS, but that's good news because then they can access information within the IRS. So when you're having trouble, you can't get your refund or you can't get that stimulus payment or, they're, I'll go over more things in another slide about the things, but about the problems that they can help you with too. But they will help you free of charge. There's no income limit to this. It's just they're there to help taxpayers when they're having problems with the IRS. So here they can help taxpayers now this is important. They can help if the taxpayer can't resolve their problem with the IRS. In other words, they're going to want to know that you've attempted to resolve the problem first and you've run into a block wall. And especially if the problem's causing any kind of financial difficulties for you, their family, or their business, or they're facing an immediate threat of adverse action, they really give priority cases to people who are in trouble and in some kind of financial straits, right? The taxpayers repeatedly try to contact IRS, but no one's responded to them, or IRS hasn't responded by the date promised. They're going to give priority to helping those folks too. Each state has at least one local taxpayer advocate, and ours is located here. This is in the IRS offices in Central Phoenix. Here's the phone number, fax number. You can also go online and they have a form 911 where you can request assistance. Okay, so a few things, final things to review, and we're almost done with all of this training. You have to pass the appropriate testing before volunteering at any Vita site. Anybody who does anything at a Vita site, they have to pass the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake and interview and quality review. Even if you're just signing people in to the site, everybody has to take those two tests. We've talked about them. They're not hard, right? Then if they're going to actually be screening documents, they have to be certified at least at the basic level to be able to screen documents. And then if you're going to prepare returns, we recommend you get certified at the advanced level. Okay. To access those certification tests, you go to linklearncertification.com. Most of you should have done this, but you're going to click on the certifications tab up here, and then you're going to click on take the certification test right here, and you can do it. We're recommending you take the advanced test, and when you click on this, it's going to take you to this screen. You have to take these two first. Most of you probably have taken those, and there'll be a little green check mark right here. So then you can go in and take the advanced test. When you start taking the advanced test, these are the screens, and I know this is hard to read, but you don't really need to read that. They're going to give you a question. You're going to select the appropriate answer. Then you're going to select next to move on to the next one. Sometimes the question wants you to enter something in. Don't try to enter it up in here, right? Your cursor won't put you in there. And it gives you this note. I know you probably can't read it, but it says whole numbers only. Do not use special characters. In other words, don't use dollar signs, don't use commas, don't use decimal points. Just put in the whole number and then click next. So you go through, you answer all of those questions, right? And then when you're all done, you're going to say, yes, I want to submit my answers. You could go back. Maybe one question gave you a clue that, oh, I answered the other one wrong. You could step back and go change your answers. But once you're ready to submit it, you click that button and you say next, and it submits it. Submit your answer, and it gives you a score right here. Now, if you don't get 80%, you can take the test one more time. Now, in previous sessions, I've highly recommended, and I'm going to recommend it again. Use your test booklet, circle all your answers in pencil before you go into this to take it. So you've already answered all the questions. Take the test and the retest. Okay, so now this next screen is extremely important. So perhaps you didn't get 80%. You get to take it one more time. The next screen, or you may have to click on this review button, I'm not sure, I forget. But now it's going to show you all of the questions you got right and got wrong. This one here says 1 out of 10, correct. You hit next, it's going to take you down. So here you've gotten one that's incorrect. Listen up. You only get to see this one time. You can never go back again. So take your test booklet. If you missed question 3, it's not going to give you the right answer, but go in there and circle it or get some way to where you can know this is the question that I missed. And it'll give you some hints of what to review. If you need to contact back your site coordinator or somebody else, if you need help and figure it out, you can't figure out why you got this wrong, okay? Do this for both the test and the retest. The retest is going to ask you a similar question. And if you got it wrong here and you don't figure it out and you don't go look and change it on your retest, then you might miss it again the second time. So that's really important you do this, okay? Last part is about the volunteer agreement. All volunteers, no matter what you do at the site, you have to complete this form 13615 volunteer agreement. It's got to be signed and dated. It shows which tests you've passed and what certification level you have. It's got to be signed by your site coordinators with a copy kept at the site. Now, actually, in some places like the city of Phoenix, there's the Vita coordinator can actually sign this, and all of this is going to be done electronically. Okay, but so here's on the next screen, how do you get to that, right? You go into Link and Learn, you go into, okay, so after passing this, it'll come up to a screen right here that says volunteer agreement. It says after passing any of the exams, you may sign your form 13615, and here's how you can sign it electronically. You click on that button. And then it brings up, this is the actual form, right? You've signed it electronically. This is really important, especially these are instructions for the city of Phoenix, but I think most partners will want you to do exactly the same thing. You've got a PDF of the volunteer agreement here. Assuming this is Adobe Acrobat, you would click on File, then you would click on Save As, and then you're going to change the name of the file. And here, this is what City of Phoenix wants, but this would be a good naming convention for anybody. First initial, last name, 136152024.pdf. Save it somewhere that you know where it's saved and you can get to it. Okay, so at home, you're going to print one copy that you can give to your site coordinator. Most site coordinators want this. I want this, that I keep a file of it, but also email it to the Vita coordinator in City of Phoenix. That's going to be at vita.taxhelp@phoenix.gov. If you're with a different agency or different nonprofit organization, ask the Vita coordinator how you get them the volunteer agreement, and they'll tell you how. So this is that volunteer agreement. The second page is going to tell you which test you've passed, give all your name, your email address. This is why me as a site coordinator, I like to have a copy of this so I know how to get in touch with you. Thank you very much for being here. We couldn't do it without you. Sincerely mean that. And so with that, that ends our tax law program training. I hope I get a chance to meet some of you. I hope to maybe see you at one of my sites, either in Scottsdale, or I run a site for City of Phoenix at Cesar Chavez Library. Be happy to meet you. And with that, good luck, and thank you again for being a Vita volunteer. Bye-bye.